Hi, this is Mary from Teacher's Pet Dog Training. One of the key things as a volunteer here at Boxer Rescue that we want to make sure that we do is get the dogs set up to be able to loose leash walk. Many of these dogs come in where they've had a collar and a leash on and they've drugged the person down the street. And that behavior in and of itself feels really good to the dogs. So that's a behavior that they're going to continue to want to do. So what we do is we want to use our freedom harness and we want to establish setting up the connection to the front chest ring with the leash, and then we practice loose leash walking. Because in the end, if the dog is loose leash walking and they get really good at it, they're going to be a much better candidate for adoption than one that's dragging you down the street. This morning I'd like to share with you a little bit of information about how do we use the freedom harness properly so that the dog doesn't end up pulling you down the street. The design of the harness has a clip that you could put on top of the dog, which is a different color than the primary part of the harness. If you clip it on the top here, then if the dog's head is right here, the dog can actually pull you down the street. So when we use this harness to work on teaching dogs how not to pull, which is what we call, they have a natural opposition reflex. If we have it held here and they start to move forward, then they're going to be pulling. That's what we call opposition reflex. So we want to actually teach them to break the natural desire to pull on a resistance. So they're pulling on the resistance of the harness. So the way we do that with a freedom harness is we want to clip our leash here on the harness. I highly recommend harnesses over collars, because what ends up happening with a collar is the dog, and probably some of you have already experienced this with your puppy, is the dog starts to pull, and then the dog has what we call a natural opposition reflex. And so collars are perfect for that. They pull forward, we pull back, they pull forward. So what we're actually reinforcing is teaching the dog to pull forward instead of teaching the dog to stay in the bubble.
And why did you say the hook's better at the bottom than the top?
If the hook is on the top and he wants to forage forward, he can still, like a sleigh dog, if he was a bigger dog, and as they get bigger, now all of a sudden they can still drive forward. So he's getting to a point now on the leash that he's not so pulling on it anymore. But in the beginning phases, if they're at the top of this, sometimes then they'll forage forward. And the bigger they get, the more they'll pull forward. Whereas the bottom line, when we're using the bottom leash line here, now biomechanically, they'll come with you. So this, you can't forward when it's going like this. It now allows you to come with you when you're asking him to turn with you. If we clip the leash on the top, and the dog, his head is here, and he's moving forward, and we're pulling back, resisting, we are now getting a natural opposition reflex. So this feels really good to the dog. So the dog will actually pull more because we have the leash clipped on the ring on the top. So the way that we start to teach the dog to loose leash walk and not pull and resist on the energy on the top of the harness is we clip the leash on the bottom ring, which is a ring that's going to be right in front of their chest. So now as they're maneuvering themselves forward, the leash will help guide them to the right or to the left. And one of the key pieces is if the dog is starting to move forward and pull it all, we stop, and now the ring will guide him back to the right or to the left. So it's really important, so the dog can't practice that opposition reflex and pulling forward, that we clip the leash from the front ring. So that's the first step. The second step is we want to make sure that if the dog is pulling you forward in any way, shape, or form, getting ahead of you in any way, that we stop. The walk stops. And as soon as the walk stops, the dog can't go anywhere one way or the other. He's going to be stationary. Now you're going to make yourself low and inviting to the dog. So for example, if I'm here and the dog has gotten ahead of me, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to be patient. I'm going to make myself low and inviting. And then as the dog turns to come towards me, I'm going to 180 and we're going to walk the other way. So now as long as the dog is loose leash walking, we're fine. If the dog comes out ahead again, the walk completely stops. I make myself low and inviting to the dog. As soon as the dog turns, and we continue the dog is moving forward and gets ahead and starts to pull ahead at all, I stop the walk, the leash is connected here, I'm going to make myself low and inviting, use my kissing sounds, and then as the dog turns to come towards me, I'm going to go ahead and turn in 180, so now we're loose leash walking. So we are only practicing walking without the dog pulling. So every single step needs to be a loose leash walk, because that's going to then reinforce the behavior that we're looking for, and that's to put no tension on the leash. I'm going to have my treats out, and I'm going to have a very, very high rate of reinforcement for the dog staying right here with me. As we're loose leash walking, I want to make sure that the dog gets rewarded heavily. So rate of reinforcement would be, I'm going to have 15 or 20 treats going into this dog's mouth as we're moving and the dog is not pulling forward at all on the leash. So the design of the harness allows biomechanically easily for the dog to be maneuvering to the right or to the left. So this helps him learn that he stays in the bubble as we're walking. And then my high rate of reinforcement then helps establish a behavior that we're looking for, which is not pulling on the leash. One of the key tips I'd like to share with you, or one of the key pieces I think is really important, when you're out with a boxer at Boxer Rescue and you are practicing showing them how to walk properly in a positive, gentle way, you are really allowing that dog a much higher opportunity to be adopted. So as we get to handle them and work with them, it's like clay. It's like having clay in your hands. You're able to mold and shape how they move with the person who's on the other end of the leash. So it's really important that you take the time to show the dog how to move in the bubble. And again, you want to use the key tools: positive energy, your positive voice, your low inviting energy, your treats. The leash, again, is only used to guide the dog or keep the dog from getting away. You want to make sure that you're not pulling on the leash, but you're using that leash as a communication system along with your treats, your low inviting energy. So again, it's like a small dance with your dog. And in the beginning phases, because there's so much energy with the boxer, they're probably going to want to go forward and back and forward and back. So you just have to be very patient. If the dog only gets 5 feet in front of you before he starts to pull, the walk stops. Make yourself low and inviting. As the dog comes back to you, you turn and you go the other way. Same thing if the dog stays in the bubble, start rewarding. Rate of reinforcement is really, really high so that they see it's worth their time and energy to stay in that bubble. Then if the dog starts to move forward, because this is all a learning curve for the dog, they've never been exposed to this before, again, our job is to make sure they never make a mistake. So if they get ahead of you again, stop, be patient, make yourself low and inviting, turn in 180 as they come back towards you, and then they get to practice some more steps of loose leash walking. As you do that back and forth, you're going to find that the dogs get to a point where they start to just follow you. Now they're paying attention to the directions that you're moving in, and they see that they're getting a very high rate of yummy treats, like the natural balanced lamb, little pieces of chicken, things that are going to be really palatable for them. Those key pieces are going to be the components we need to do as volunteers to get the dog to practice that loose leash walking. Again, if you stay away from the clip on the top, we can prevent that opposition reflex where they're pulling us down the street. So keep that clip in the front, take your time, be patient with the boxer, and you're going to have some really good behavioral results. I hope that tip helps. Let's get our leashes, our harnesses, our treats, and our positive energy, and don't forget your boxer, and have some great time. They'll love you for it.